What's up, guys? I want to tell you the story of my very first consulting job, and the funny part about all this is that when I was doing this, I was a sophomore in college, and I was actually so lacking in confidence that I actually tried to talk the guy out of hiring me a couple times when we were chatting over email, so it's pretty funny. I actually pulled up the email thread here on my iPad, and it's really embarrassing to read through this, but it's really insane to think about how far I've come since when I started this. So basically, the story goes that I was a sophomore in college, I needed to get a job to pay some bills, and I was thinking, like, I could either get a job in the cafeteria or at fast food or something, or I could try and get a consulting job programming, because that's what I want to do after college when I graduate. So why wouldn't I try and get a programming job now, since I want to get one later anyways? So I decided to look at some job boards, and I was poking around trying to find someone who would be willing to give a newbie like myself a chance. And I stumbled upon this guy that sounded like he was building a new company on the side in the nights and weekends around his job. So I said, hey, I'll send this guy an email and see what happens. So I sent him this email, which was 2 really formally written questions, didn't introduce myself, pretty much the textbook version of the worst thing you could possibly send for your first email. I said, what sort of projects would the position include? What specific responsibilities would this position entail? It was terrible. But the guy wrote me back and was like, hey, I'm trying to build this app and whatever, and he described it and asked me for my portfolio stuff. So I wrote him an email back and was like, hey, here's some things I've worked on. I don't really know most of what you're asking for, so I want to let you know that, but I really am really excited to learn all those things. So hopefully you'd give me a chance to learn that, and maybe we can work something out. And he was like, cool, that sounds great. I guess the next thing that we should do is talk about, give you a programming challenge. So that's when I began to freak out. And I was also talking to my mom about this because I was like being bugged by her to get a job. And so I was telling her I might have an opportunity to get paid to do Python programming. She's telling me, like, how are you going to get paid? How do you deal with taxes? How are you going to do contracts? Like all this stuff for consulting that I'd never done before. And I was like, that's a good point. I have no idea, and that's making me nervous too. But most of all, I was nervous that I wouldn't be good enough to do what he wanted. And so then he asked me for that programming challenge, and that's when I began to doubt myself. And so I wrote him an email back, and I was like, hey, basically, after thinking about it more, I think I should wait before pursuing a job as a developer. While I'm sure that we'd work great as a team, I feel that this should not be my goal during sophomore year of school, and started to write about, I don't know if I should be doing this, and basically it's just me being unconfident in myself and freaking out. And so he writes me back and he's like, well, I kind of understand, but if you want to get a job, real experience is more useful than a GPA. And I was like, that's a good point. And then responded with like, hey, I'm worried about all these things. Like, I don't know how to do taxes or get paid or like any of this stuff. And my mom's worried about it. And I actually told him that my mom was worried about it, which is where things get really weird, because I look back on that and I'm like, wow, I dragged my mom into the email conversation about it and didn't just ask for myself. And that's pretty embarrassing. So as you can tell here, my confidence level was really low. But as it turned out, I was super honest with the guy and telling him exactly where I was at, in my career. I wasn't that confident. He was doing this thing on the side. And so he knew that, hey, look, I'll give you $400 to try and build these features. And it turned out that we ended up doing that. And he gave me a job. I worked my butt off. I probably made 50 cents an hour because I was learning all this stuff, but I was getting paid to learn, so that was worth it for me. And so I ended up working for this guy for a couple years on this project, and even later on, when I had graduated and quit my job to start consulting again, this guy became one of my favorite clients again, and even offered me a job later on. So it's really cool to see how that turned out, but the key piece here was that I pushed myself over the edge of the cliff before I could stop myself. And I emailed the guy, told him all this stuff, and was like, I don't think you should hire me, I don't know that I'm good enough or whatever. But I actually had asked him already about the job and stuff, and so I put myself out there already, and so that was enough for me to get the ball rolling, and I did end up getting the job. So it's really interesting to see how we as developers are not sure how much to charge, or if we can get a job as a junior developer somewhere or whatever. And really it all comes down to put yourself out there before you think you're ready. Just talk to people, ask them what they're looking for, if they'd be willing to hire you, or what you need to learn if they say no, so that they would hire you. All that stuff is really easy, but you have to go talk to people and ask that kind of stuff, and then you'll get the answers to it. And then people will give you a chance because you're actually taking the initiative to go do that. So don't be afraid of going and doing these things. Put yourself out there, and you're going to end up in places you never imagined you could actually end up being in. So that's why I wanted to tell you guys this story. We tend to be very self-doubting when we're learning programming for the first time, especially when you're trying to get your first job. You're not sure how much you're worth or any of those things. And the fact is, none of that really matters. As long as you can pay your rent and whatever, then you can always work your way up the ladder. But you have to get into that very first job and do whatever it takes to get that going so that you can use that as your baseline for your next one. So whether that's you're working full-time somewhere or you're consulting for people, you can always trade up. But you have to get that first foot in the door before you can trade up and move on to the next one. So maybe you can apply this to your career some way. And if you have any stories that are like this about getting your first programming job or whatever it is, I would love to hear those in the comments below. So we'll be back next week and the week after that, because finally I'm gonna sit down and make these videos for you guys, because I was also self-doubting making these videos, and well, I'm just gonna throw myself in the deep end, record this, upload it, and you guys will see me next week. Later.